Well, good afternoon, or as they're saying, perhaps good evening, or perhaps good morning, depending upon the time zone that you are in. And welcome to our final session for this Climate Migrant Symposium. I think it's been a really great 3 days. And I will have a few more remarks and thanks to give, but I want to turn it over to someone who I hadn't met 2 months ago, but who's now a real friend and colleague, who I'm proud to call my friend and colleague, Andrea Milan.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you very much, Paul. It's the pleasure and is fully reciprocal, and I can only second and say I would say the same about you. It's been a pleasure, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. It's an honor to offer closing remarks at the end of a rich symposium, very rich symposium. And my name is Andrea Milan. I am a senior program manager at the Global Center for Climate Mobility, a global partner for this initiative. And therefore, Paul will, I'm sure, give all the thanks. I just want to thank him and the team at the Western Michigan University for the smooth work. I would also like to thank the moderators who kept us on time, and many of them kindly shared some key takeaways from their sessions, given how rich the program was, to help us think about, in fact, how could I close these remarks, this symposium, sorry, in a meaningful way. And I would also like to thank the presenters who shared their work and all the participants for the very active engagement. It's been a long 3 days, so I'll try to keep this short, and I will try to do three things. Highlight some cross-cutting priorities that I think came across the different sessions. Briefly reflect on the three keynotes that I think were especially impactful and important on the discussions, and finally close with reflection on where this conversation points us, in my view. So starting from the cross-cutting priorities, I think four topics were very central to many of the sessions over the past 3 days. The first that I would like to highlight is dignity and agency across all forms of mobility and immobility. We had sessions on international responses, city planning, case studies at the national, regional level, legal pathways. And I think across all these sessions, many speakers looked into specific but very important questions. Do our policies, our responses expand people's choices, meaning the right to move safely and the right to stay safely, or do they not? So dignity and agency. The second point is the importance of planning, acknowledging deep uncertainty. We were reminded that some drivers are well understood, others are known or are partially unknown with some data gaps, and there are shocks that we don't foresee and that will surprise us. We all know how COVID transformed dynamics of human mobility, right? For example. The practical implication is humility, I think, or what I took from this. We need scenario-based planning, we need continuous monitoring, and we need policy designs that can adapt rather than us thinking about predicting or anything along those lines. The third topic that was covered by many sessions was the importance of evidence that turns into action. We heard from very different, very quantitative approaches like risk indexing to very qualitative approaches like ethnography. And I think we saw how macro quantitative models and community insight can be fused to anticipate displacement and be targeted in the support. And the fourth key area of discussion, I think, was urban realities and justice. We've had many case studies from South Asia, from West Africa, from North America, highlighting cities as spaces of adaptation, opportunity, but also spaces of potential exclusion. So we need to think about justice, and we need to make sure that local priorities are aligned with regional and national instruments on very practical topics like jobs and skills, housing, services, access to social protection and other forms of government services. So those are the four priorities that I think were reflected throughout the program. And then I wanted to reflect briefly on the three keynotes. I couldn't be in every session also because some of them were parallel, but uh, there are a few things I took from the keynotes. The first keynote from Beth Ferris was about planned relocation for those who did not attend it. And it reminded us that success requires participatory process and financing, but it also requires clear institutional mandates, reflections on land and housing solutions that protect cultural and social bonds, in addition, of course, to being predictable and clear. And so livelihoods and service restorations are core, not just afterthoughts when it comes to planned relocations. And Beth was mentioning how sometimes we talk about planned relocation of people, but we never talk about relocation of livelihoods, businesses, and that should also be an element that we think about. And I think she also pointed to persistent gaps, normative, procedural, knowledge related that must be addressed. And she's written on this topic for over a decade. So please look at her work. She's looked into many of those issues. On displacement and uncertainty, the second keynote from Robert McLeeman really urged us to design policy, and this is my own take on this. We need to be robust with what we know. We need to be flexible with things we may know and not fully know. And we need to be alert to shocks that we cannot predict. And so, under deep uncertainty, and as I was mentioning earlier, this is a topic that came across many sessions. We need scenario planning, we need early warning, integrating social indicators, and we need to be able to correct the course as even evidence evolves. So, the importance of managing uncertainty was at the heart of his keynote. Last but not least, the Deputy Managing Director of the Global Center of Climate Mobility, that I have the privilege to work in, discussed a very important issue and outlined the rationale as to why the Global Center for Climate Mobility and many others in this space choose to use climate mobility as the concept, as the basis for our knowledge work, for action, for our policy engagement, because affected countries do not aspire to be displaced and then deal with issues of displacement. People want to be able to stay home. They want to be able to return. They want to be able to move and come back. So mobility opens the door to the kinds of policies and projects and programs that we actually need, from labor pathways to social protection portability to place-based investments and even relocations in some cases. So mobility gives us a lot of flexibility without the legal complications related to the use of words that have very strongly strong legal connotations. And we have a toolbox to build from. We have new tools, we have innovative agreements like the Falepili Union that we can look at. So mobility is a framing that allows us to capture the topic in its complexity. So to conclude, because again, it's been a long and very rich 3 days, and I'll be thinking about what I've been hearing for days, and I hope you all do too. There are five takeaways from me from this symposium. The first is we need to center dignity and agency. So any program, project, policy design has to be designed with communities and think about the right to move and the right to stay. The second takeaway for me is we need to plan for uncertainty. So we need scenarios-based planning and we need adaptive policies across sectors. We live in a non-linear world. We need to plan for uncertainty and be flexible. The third key takeaway is the importance of pairing tools with finance. And finance has to be locally led. And Beth Ferris in her keynote was highlighting the importance of this issue, but it came across in several other sessions. The fourth point relates to mobility itself, and is that we need to strengthen protection and lawful pathways for mobility. And there's a lot already happening. We heard many concrete examples from different regions, so we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We just need to use what exists better, learn across regions, and advance on what is missing. Finally, last but not least, we need to invest in cities as places of inclusion. So skills, housing, services, and protection need to meet people where they are, including migrants when they arrive to cities. So cities have to be at the heart of the response. So in conclusion, I think what I'm taking from this is that the work that we all strive to do in the climate mobility space will be judged, the success of what we're doing, by whether people can live the lives they value safely, with dignity and real choices, whether they decide to stay or to go. Thanks again, everyone. And Paul, over to you for your closing words. Thanks again.
Thank you, Andrea. And Krishma, could you give me the thank you slide, please? So it was in December, less than a year ago, that we started thinking about this symposium. And as I mentioned in my opening remarks 3 days ago, it came from the recognition that the international community, the climate change institutions and so on, is waking up to the challenge of climate migration. And when I say climate migration, I don't want to not include those who are sort of stuck behind, left behind, or who choose not to move, but as part and parcel of the challenge of climate migration, appreciating Andrea's very thoughtful remarks. But that the numbers are already in the tens of millions, and the response is nowhere near enough. And those numbers in the tens of millions will be moving to the hundreds of millions in coming decades. And it really is a challenge that the international community we don't know what's going to hit us in this area. And basically, when I started, and when I and my colleagues started talking with people about this and started presenting the idea for this symposium, almost every time the answer was yes. We've had, again, I'm going to say the Global Center for Climate Mobility has been a global partner. The Platform on Disaster Displacement has been a global partner. People from both of those organizations that I spoke to many months ago, when I first started talking about this with them, they said, yes, let's do this. And they gave me names and they gave me contacts. And that's part of how this has all been possible. I want to now bring your attention to the slide that you see in front of you. And when you try to do thanks about an event like this, you can't possibly thank everyone who was helpful, because it's just way too many people. But in terms of those who were specifically involved in making this particular, actively involved in managing the symposium, making it work, certainly all of our panel moderators, and I'm not going to try to read this list of names, but you've been great. Thank you so much. We've had such great discussions. The symposium coordinating committee, I do want to read these names: Chiamaka Rita Akbuagbo, Estella Aragon, of course myself, Breeding Clements Cotton, Tim Kasten, Andrea Milan, and Kathy Seeberger. When you do something like this, when you try to give thanks, you kind of feel like, well, you shouldn't thank anyone specially, because then the others will feel less thanks. But I'm going to break that rule, and I'm going to say that in terms of who I feel, if they hadn't been there, this just wouldn't have happened. I'm going to call out Kathy Seeberger on our coordinating committee, who joined our coordinating committee from the very beginning, and she's been a volunteer. I think she and Tim Kasten on our committee are the only two people on this list who did it all with no professional role, no financial, just entirely as volunteers. And so Kathy, and also Tim, but particularly Kathy, you've been here all the way through. Thank you very much. I mentioned in my earlier remarks Breeding Cotton, Breeding Clements Cotton. I will say she's my daughter, but even though she's my daughter, the reason we got her is because she is so great at what she does. And I think all of you can understand the practical complexity of bringing together a symposium like this in terms of all the relationships, all of the digital stuff that I don't begin to understand, and having someone who could bring it all together and who did all that work. Thank you so much to Breeding. And finally, I want to come back to, again, my friend Andrea Milan, who I didn't know before, but who, once the Global Center for Climate Mobility came on board, then I've never organized a conference, any kind of conference actually, much less a global conference of people from all over the world. And Andrea's, the form that this has taken and the way it's all come together is so much due to his contribution all the way through. And I think that his concluding remarks, the way he drew together the themes of the conference is an indication of his just sort of deep knowledge and competence that he brought to this and that he brought to the entire organizing aspect. So again, thank you really so much, Andrea. Not to downplay everybody else, we needed you all. So then just on the technical side, you know, Karishma and Melissa, you did a great job. Jordan Roberts, our website designer, I think often the website designer is just kind of someone way in the background. And in some respects, he has been in the background, but he's done so much work and just always been there for us. And so thank you so much to Jordan. I want to then finally come back to my colleagues on the Climate Change Working Group at Western Michigan University. When we started talking about this, if you hadn't gotten behind me, obviously this wouldn't have happened. We haven't even mentioned your reviewing all of the proposals and, you know, figuring out, yeah, these are all great proposals. And fortunately, we only had a few proposals that we had to not accept. And so your help all the way through has been so essential to the success of this program. But of course, I think everyone understands that the success of the program is not a question of the organizers. The success of the program is basically a matter for the participants. When I speak of participants here, we have different categories. We have had 111 speakers, my goodness. And the thought you put into your presentations and the insights and the sharing. We have had 392 total attendees over these 3 days from 52 countries. And I know that, you know, when people come to a symposium like this, they only come because they care about these issues, that we understand that people who are displaced from their homes and livelihoods by climate change or nearly displaced, that their displacement is a deep injustice, that it's because of climate change that they had little to do with, that others have caused. And for all of us who are stepping up to this challenge, you know, I want to say thank you. That I understand that was why you're here. That's what our discussions have been about. So yes, Andrea, we have had, you know, a number of really great themes and lessons learned, and in our discussions in all the panels, there have been insights. I've seen the networking going on, and of course, for all of us, the challenge is now, you know, to put this to work. The challenges of climate migration have just begun. They're going to be far greater in coming years than they are today, and the time to build for that is now. So thank you very much. And that is the end of our program.